Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Does it bother you that Big Lou is on speed dial on the Suits phone?
It should bother the people in the Suits' life. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty neutral on it. All right. But I just thought I'd ask. I mean, and the Valley's a very tight-knit group, and there's got to be some people concerned out there. I don't think I'll hang with him anymore. This half hour being brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports domestic microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day. 6 great flavors of slushies and ready-to-drink cocktails. High Noon, Crown Royal, and Jack Daniels. And the Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none, all at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. All right, let's bring in Nick Farabaugh. Just got back from the Senior Bowl. Nick, first of all, how have you been?
I've been doing very well. It's always good to get out and about. So, start of the offseason. Feeling good.
Yeah. It is the start of the offseason. So, all right, the Steelers have an interesting quandary at quarterback, and they'll make a decision on that. But the door could be open to maybe drafting a quarterback. So, I'm going to bring up a name, and you got a chance to see him down there. What has been your read? Not as a first-round pick. Again, not as a first-round pick. But what's your read on Jackson Dart?
You know, I think my read on Jackson Dart is he's going to have a transition period that's pretty steep, a year or two probably, just more than other quarterbacks. He hasn't really played under center. He played in an offense that was very much one read, not a lot of NFL-level reads where you had to go 1, 2, 3 and hit a guy. And so whenever he did that, I thought he looked a little uncomfortable. He's not a great thrower of the football in terms of accuracy. He's got good tools. I think he's got a nice arm. Doesn't really throw with a ton of anticipation. So I think, there's a lot of things he's going to have to work on. I think the tools there are going to be intriguing, though. I think he's toolsier than a lot of other players. Not quite as toolsy as Milroe, but I also think his game around is more polished than Milroe's, which will make him a little more appealing to a lot of teams. He looks like a third-round pick to me. A third, fourth-rounder. Not obviously, as you said, not a first-rounder. That height makes no sense. I don't even think a second-rounder. I think, that third, fourth round makes sense for him. I'm not sure the Steelers in particular are a great landing spot for Dart. I think he has to probably sit and learn a little bit. I think any young quarterback the Steelers select on day 2 will probably at some point be thrust into some action. I think Dart just kind of needs to sit for a year to learn the NFL playbook, learn NFL progressions, learn how to play under center, learn how to do basic things that a lot of NFL quarterbacks do. And I think he has a chance to be, a solid player. If you can land him in that third round, I think that'd be a good pick.
Yeah, I think as well. Obviously, I've done a Jackson Dart game. I saw a lot of video on him leading up into the game because I did the Peach Bowl he was in. Not good with pressure in his face. Can move. Has accuracy and a really good arm along the way. Can run if he needs to. The issue would be being a system quarterback. The stuff under center, no offense, that can be learned. Alex Smith played exclusively as a shotgun quarterback at Utah. So, I mean, last I checked, he made the transition. May not have been a Hall of Fame career, but he's pretty good. So, yeah, it's you do have to learn that part, but that's why you still have a Russell Wilson there. But to be honest with you, I think he's better than Justin Fields at the same level, right? And I saw both of them in person.
Yeah, I do think Dart's interesting in that regard.
Yeah. Okay, so on need for the Steelers, did you go down there with the idea of looking at players that the Steelers might need positionally? And if so, Nick, who'd you walk away saying, you know what, he'd be a good fit?
Yeah, I did. Outside of quarterback, obviously, I was looking at defensive line, corner, receiver.
Yeah.
Those are the big three that stuck out. And I think defensive line, it's just so deep. And there were so many good defensive linemen, the interior guys. Darius Alexander out of Toledo just dominated that week. Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss is an absolute missile off the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
So explosive. I love his game. Deion Walker, I think, is a little bit of a different player, but he is a big man. He is 6'7", 340, and he pushes the pocket with explosiveness. There are so many players. Aeneas Peoples out of Virginia Tech. He's an undersized player, but he really gets after it. He's probably a sub-package rush specialist. He's a fun player. Corner, I really thought Azaria Thomas is an interesting player at Florida State. He's about 6'2", 210. He's got length. He fits a lot into that Jay Porter Jr., Corey Trucks mold that the Steelers seem to really love. I think he'd be a good fit. And then the other guy, Jack Besh out of TCU. I love that kid's game. He's a blocker. He's a hoss. He's a former tight end. He's got great hands. But even though he's a former tight end, he gets out of breaks way better than you think. He can separate. He can win at the catch point. So there are a few names there. But what the biggest takeaway I had was, wow, is this defensive line class just so deep?
Yeah, no, very deep. Something that, though, I always feel like people have a tendency to overthink the draft. And when you're talking about upper-level guys that play in the major conferences, it's fine to find a gem like Quinyon Mitchell. That's fine. But I want to look at guys that are good on good, right? So you're playing in the SEC. It's Alabama against Georgia. It's LSU against Alabama. It's whatever. It's Penn State, Michigan. It's Michigan, Ohio State. I like to look at good on good, right? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I like to see good on good. For those small school guys, I think Senior Bowl is a really big thing. So you talk about Quinton Mitchell, obviously. And he just hadn't had a lot of great kind of tape out against top guys. He had faced Marvin Harrison Jr., which was a nice twist to have in there. But we got to see him against guys from Michigan and Georgia. And I think those small school guys really benefit from these because you can really see them against major competition. As for the major competition guys, I think the tape really does show a lot already. I think you get a feel. If you're a guy out of Kentucky, for example, if you're Deion Walker, I mean, you faced Alabama, you faced Tennessee, you faced Georgia, you faced Ole Miss, you faced all these top SEC teams. So you're really already kind of facing the top of the top. And so I'm looking more for traits. I'm looking for consistency. I'm looking for how those guys kind of tick on and off the field. And so I do think that a lot of people do overthink the process. I think, a lot of times, too, when we talk about specific kind of big name guys, at the top of the board, like an Abdul Carter or a Will Johnson that have been around just for years and everybody knows that they're going to be a first-round pick, you get fatigued with those guys. Sometimes when those guys randomly fall down the board, I think a lot of that kind of looks at, I remember Christian Gonzalez 2 years ago. Everybody knew out of Oregon 2 years ago before he even came out he was going to be a top pick. Now he's with the Patriots, and he looks like a pretty darn good pick, but he fell to 17. And so I think some people just overthink it. I think there's some fatigue with some prospects that have been there for a while. But when you're talking about major conference guys, most of the tape's already there. At the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, et cetera, you're really just filling in the blanks. Small school guys, I think, have more blanks to fill in.
Yeah, they do. That's why a guy like Mitchell steps in. You mentioned he played enough quality teams in the non-conference schedule for Toledo. Wide receiver. Look, no offense, Pickens is a problem. And a talented problem, but he's a problem. Should the Steelers think at some point over the 3 days about a wide receiver or two to help out with this offense?
Yes, and I think they will. And it can come anywhere from the first round to the third round. I think they're going to take one in the top 3 rounds. It's not as deep a class as it has been in recent memory. It's still a good enough class. There's still guys down from rounds 1, 2, and 3 that they can find. And so I do think they're going to look at somebody. I also think they're going to add somebody before the draft. You know, there's a lot of names out there, a lot of names: Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, et cetera, that'll get thrown around. I think they'll add somebody. We'll see who it is, but I think they're going to give themselves some insurance. I think Pickens, because he is in the last year's deal, and I don't expect them to extend him, I do think he'll be here next year. I do think he'll be here in 2025. I don't think they're going to trade him. But I do think they will have to look at the draft and say, okay, can we find a guy that profiles similar to him? Can we get that guy in the program for a year and then maybe take over in 2026? And there's a few names you could think of for that. They can go, all the way up to the first round. They could take an Ibuka. They can take a Matthew Golden. If you go to the second round, you can take a Trey Harris. You could take a Jack Besh. If you go to the third round, you can take a guy like Ty Felt. So there's a lot of names up and down this board that make sense for them.
Yeah, because they could use it. How do you think the free agency part, to me, always sets up how you draft? I mean, that way, were you able to fill in some holes in free agency? Okay, now let's take a look at the draft. Well, part of that is the quarterback issue. How do you expect that to play out between Fields and Wilson as to which one stays and which one might be looking?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to money. I think they want a multi-year deal with one of those two if they come back. I also wouldn't rule out them looking at external options. I do think they're going to open the door to looking at that. So I'm not going to say Russell Wilson or just Fields are 100% going to be back. I think it probably leans more towards Fields. Well, the reason I say more towards Fields is I think they kind of know what they have in Russ. It pittered down the stretch. There's some tension, I think, in the locker room there about that. I think Fields is loved in the locker room. Everyone loved how he handled the benching. They saw some growth from him from his time in Chicago to the first 6 games in Pittsburgh. And he's young, so at least there's upside to kind of bank on before you kind of go out there and try and make a big move. Because it doesn't really feel like there's a big move to be made at that position this year, to be quite honest. I guess the big move, if you made one, would be signing Sam Darnold. But that's really not that big compared to some other moves that have been made in the past. They're not going to be in range to probably go up and get a Cam Ward or a Sanders, and I don't even think they like them enough. So where they're kind of really at right now is I think they will look more towards probably going towards Justin Fields. I think he's going to be cheaper. I think he's got the young upside option. I think he can be a bridge quarterback for the young quarterback that they might look at in 26. And then if they do go outside the org, you maybe get another veteran. Think of Jacoby Brissett, someone like that that's just been around the block, kind of knows what they're doing.
I mean, Brissett's good enough to be in a commercial. So just kidding. What is he? He does taxes in the commercial. When they let's go to the backup. Yeah, I think he does somebody's taxes. The Steelers are drafting 21. Nick, they become the Atlanta Hawks. In other words, good enough to be the playoffs, not bad enough to be in the lottery, but also not good enough to advance. Do you feel like they're stuck in no man's land right now?
I mean, they absolutely are stuck in no man's land. It's the same story we've seen for the last half decade. They've made the playoffs 4 out of the 5 years, which should be a good resume for any franchise. It's been blown out and pulverized in 3 of those 4 games, and then lost to the Browns at home in the other game. And so it's tough because they aren't going to probably pick a premium position unless they trade them. On top of that, they kind of have not drafted very well. Kevin Colbert's late drafts not looking too great, right? Kenny Pickett gone. That 2022 draft is already looking pretty bad. 2021 draft isn't looking that great. Fryermuth's got an extension, obviously. Doesn't seem like Najee Harris is going to be back. So there's just a lot that didn't go well at the end of Kevin Colbert's tenure, and I think Omar Khan and Andy Waddle and Mike Tomlin kind of have to look at that, rebuild what they're looking at. So that's part of it. But right now, they're just not getting the results they want because coaching hasn't been as up to standard. There's still talent deficits all across the board, right? I mean, you look at receiver, you look at the young lines. The lines now getting old. They need corners. They need guys. And so quarterback on top of that, when you throw it in there, when you don't have great elite coaching, I think that is been highlighted more. So they are stuck in the mud because they're not in a spot to gain premium talents. They have to kind of scout their way around it, and it can be done. They just have to show their ability to do it. So when you're stuck in this 2021, really they're picked between 18 and 26 most years, and so they have to look and see where they can win on the margins because they're not going to get those blue chippers fall into that.
Yeah, you can learn lessons from the teams that win it, so you always look like how are they built. Let's give Howie Roseman, the Eagles, credit. Since 2020, they have drafted 27 players. 24 are still with the team, and 11 are playing significant roles. I mean, they're scouting it. I mean that's the lesson I think the Steelers have to take. Like, you know, how do they scout and who they select?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And you look at the Eagles too. Not only do they do this great thing where they draft really well, because they landed guys on day 3 like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat and those players. They also really supplement those with really smart free agent signings, right? Zach Bond was an edge rusher. They turned into an all-pro linebacker.
Right.
Saquon, obviously, they were ahead of that running back revolution. They landed Saquon. He became an explosive player in their running offense. J. Gardner-Johnson turned into a really nice player. They attacked the secondary, which was a huge issue last year, getting Quinton Mitchell and then trading up and getting Cooper DeJean. They also make aggressive moves. They'll go up and make trades, right? They traded up for Devontae Smith. They traded for A.J. Brown, trade for Darius Slay. So they make moves, too, that are aggressive and make sense. They win in all areas. Howie Roseman wins on the margin, and drafting is a big part of that. I mean, you look at some of their picks. Jordan Mailata was a 7th-round pick they developed into an all-pro, a little player, to be quite honest with you. And so everybody they draft, Jalen Hurts was a 2nd-round quarterback that had a lot of questions and has turned into a really good player. They just developed the two. On top of that, when you win on the margins like that, when you can get significant production from 4th-round picks like they are, from 2nd-round picks like they are, from a 7th-rounder like Mailata, that's how you build Super Bowl winning rosters.
But you also have some bad luck along the way, too. Zach Frazier turns out to be a terrific pick to play center, but the 1st-round pick out of Washington, who you can tell is a terrific talent, doesn't play at all, but then will get an opportunity coming up. How important will his development be so they don't have to worry about that spot?
Yeah, Troy Fautanu's development is going to be absolutely massive. They need a tackle. Roger Jones, I think, is still a question of the air. I do think the Steelers have done a nice job building that offensive line. They signed Isaiah Malo, who is definitely a solid starter in this league. Frazier looks like a stud. McCormick stepped in for James Daniels and looked like a pretty solid player as a 4th-round pick. Like, those are the types of picks. If you want to be the Eagles, you need to make Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier-like picks. I think Fautanu, being a kind of key stalwart as a right tackle or a left tackle, whichever one he ends up playing, is going to be huge for this team because not only did they sink 2 first-round picks into the tackle, Fautanu was there with some injury concerns. He was flagged with knee issues. Hopefully it's nothing too bad. But you missed not only on Quinton Mitchell, you missed on Brian Thomas. So there are 2 really good players right after them that they could have taken if it wasn't for Fautanu. So I think that's a little hindsight analysis, but I do think wide receiver and corner are neat. So they scouted those guys heavily. Fautanu, though, becoming a big name on that line would give them 3 out of the 5 long-term pieces.
Yes.
I think that'd be huge for their running game. If the Steelers want to become a running game, run-first team, they need big uglies to be really good. And I think Fautanu, with his athleticism, with his meanness, with his nastiness, is the perfect fit for the Steelers. I think he looked great in the one game he played against Denver, which ended up being a really tough matchup for him because he faced Nick Benito, who ended up having a great season. But I do think Fautanu has the chance to be a really good player, and his development is going to be huge for this offensive line.
Yeah, again, that's the sometimes you have bad luck, all right, and that's one of them right there where you're like, oh, of all the things that happen, because I think when he gets a chance, I'm with you. Well, I think when he gets a chance, he's going to be pretty good. That's me.
Yeah, I think he will. And you not only did they lose Troy Fautanu, I mean they drafted Roman Wilson in the 3rd round.
Yes, and I like him.
Or passing off. So even more bad luck. They lost 3 out of their. I think they lost 4 out of their draft class last year. Logan Lee and Ryan Watts were 6th-round picks, but from those 2 to Wilson to Fautanu, all those guys basically played 2 games combined. So that's significant. Lee and Watts were lost in the preseason for the season. Wilson suffered an ankle injury, played 1 game. Then lost for the season with the hamstring injury. Then Falatana got lost week 2 with the knee injury. So really, they had a ton of bad luck. They basically lost most of their draft class last year just to injury.
And Roman Wilson will be a good slot receiver for them. Saw a lot of him at Michigan. He'll be a good slot receiver for them. That's where I think he's going to fit in. Sometimes you just have bad luck. Now, we had good luck today. We had you on the show. So we appreciate that very much. Nick, thanks a lot for your time. That was really great to knock some things around with you.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. It's always great to talk to you.
Oh, same here. Thanks so much, Nick. Nick Farabaugh, what a great job he does. Enjoy him very, very much in the work that he does. And it's he gives you, the audience, some great insight. This half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, waters, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, and with Crown Royal, High Noon, and Jack Daniels ready-to-drink cocktails. Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Forget the groundhog. The sales manager at Sunbury Motors Kia saw his shadow on the lot, so that can only mean one thing. Huge discounts at Sunbury Motors Kia.
Wanna see ya in a Kia. Sunbury Motors Kia.
Hurry into Sunbury Motors Kia now and save up to $5,000 on 2025 Kia Sorentos with third-row seating. Sunbury Motors Kia has 14 to choose from. Save $36.34 on 2025 all-wheel drive Kia Sportages. SMC has 25 available. You can save even more on Sorentos and Sportages with $750 in additional savings for owner loyalty. Save $32.21 on the hottest-selling third-row V6 SUV, the 2025 Kia Telluride, with 17 to pick from. More winter and early spring. Forget about all that. Let's be alive in 2025 with huge savings on new Kias through the end of February at Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummel's Wharf.